We're doing our Day 1 notes. The first word on here is congruence. Congruence, hopefully you know what that means. It means having the same measure. Or measurement, I guess you could say. The congruent symbol looks like an equal sign because it's basically equal. They just draw a little squiggly line over it. That's what makes it congruent. So it's two straight lines like an equal sign and then a squiggle line above it. Alright, two angles that are congruent. So let's say I have this picture. I'm just going to put some letters on it. Alright, so if I wanted to say, hopefully you could probably tell that those angles look equal, but if you were going to write it out, they would put these little marks in the corner to represent things are equal. You mark a picture like this to show congruence. Okay? And then you would write angle, let's say ABD is congruent to angle. Let's go ABD, so we could say CBD. Or you could say DBC. This angle and this angle are equal, are congruent. And segments, in a picture with segments, okay, this is just one long segment, RST. The way you mark a segment is congruent. You put a little dash mark on those. So that is the symbol for congruence in a picture. And how you would write that, we'd say segment RS is congruent to segment ST. That's the congruent symbol, that's the segment symbol, and that's how you mark it in a picture. Alright, some just review on words you may have known from before. Parallel are lines that never touch. Most of us probably remember what they look like. These lines would be considered parallel here. So, what makes them unique this year? They are non-intersecting lines on the same plane. Means they never touch, but they're on the same plane. You also might see something called parallel planes. Parallel planes would be planes that never intersect, so flat surfaces that never intersect. So parallel lines are lines that don't intersect, but they're on the same plane. Okay, parallel planes don't ever intersect. That's more like a 3D. The top of a Kleenex box and the bottom of the Kleenex box would be parallel planes. Okay, the symbol for parallel looks like this. Okay, looks like the number 11. That means parallel. And to say a picture of it, try my best to draw you a picture here. A little bit of space. I'm just going to try and draw like a 3D picture here. And put some letters. And I got letters on all the corners. So in this picture, I could say like FE. This segment over here is parallel to segment DG. Or I guess that should be FE would be, try and scratch that out. We'll say GD. Okay? Or you could say segment FE is parallel to segment, oh, I missed a letter down there. I gotta have another letter in that corner. Put an H down there. So FE could also be parallel to AH. And technically, FE could be parallel to BC. It would just be a diagonal plane that we don't have drawn in this picture. Alright, let's see. Perpendicular are objects that intersect at 90 degrees. you could also, the reason I said objects, it could be rays, points, lines, anything that could intersect. Okay, the symbol for perpendicular looks like upside down capital T. So this is line M and this is line N, and if there's a 90-degree box in the corner, that symbol shows in the picture that that is 90 degrees. So we would write that out as line M is perpendicular to line N. Again, not much room to write there, but that's the perpendicular symbol. Skew will be new for some of you guys this year. Skew are non-intersecting lines, kind of like parallel. These are on different planes. So if you look up at my picture I had with up here, then one that can be considered skew lines, we could say they just have to like kind of change directions and they would never intersect. So what if I said segment FA? Unfortunately, there is none. There is no symbol for this, but I could say segment FA here, this front corner is skew with, let's say, BC. Because this line is going vertical, this line is going horizontal, but those planes would never intersect. So that's an example of skew. Midpoint kind of makes sense. Mid means middle, point is like a dot. So midpoint is the point halfway between endpoints. On a segment. Thought for you. Is it possible to have a midpoint of a line? The answer would be no. You cannot have a midpoint of a line because the line goes on forever, so you never know where the halfway point is. So it has to be of a segment. So I'm going to draw a picture over here. KLM. To show that it's halfway in the middle, you would put these little marks. Those hash marks show that those two segments are congruent. So for something to be a midpoint, they would just write it with either a congruent symbol or an equal symbol. So if they wrote KL, segment is congruent to segment LM. So that's when they use the congruent symbol. If they just use the letters KL and put equals to LM, that is another way to write it. This segment is equal to that segment, whereas this one is just in this segment is congruent. When they use the congruent symbol, they use the segment symbol. When they do equals, they're just saying the measure of this equals the measure of that. Alright, so let's read something and see if we can draw it. Draw the requested scenario. Make sure you mark all stated relationships. Alright, so this says line RS intersects ray AB. So I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to put an R and an S on it. It says intersects ray AB at point B. So if it has to intersect at point B, B has to be somewhere on that line. Okay? And since it has to be ray AB, A comes first, so that has to be the starting point. Now you could draw that going a different direction, but the two have to intersect at point B, and this one has to be a line with arrows on both ends, and this one has to be a ray with the starting point of A. So like that. What I would do at this point is pause the video and see if you can do the next two. Try and read through these and see if you could come up with a picture that would work for you. Okay, hopefully hopefully welcome back. This says plane T contains segments A, B, and CD. This one's a little bit more complicated. It has a lot of different parts to it. So I need two segments which intersect at point L. So somewhere you need to put a capital T for plane T. I never know how to draw them. Sometimes it's easier to do this with pencil. Here's my segment AB, and I need a segment CD. Sometimes if it says that these two things are perpendicular, we'd need to put a little box in the middle, but this one doesn't. So it just says they intersect at point L. So where these two meet at, I'm going to put a capital L. Also construct a line ED that's non-coplanar. Non-coplanar means it's not on the same plane. So it's going to intersect this plane but not be on the plane. So sometimes they draw it like this. Let's see if I can draw one here. And then they might draw little lines here to show that it's going to come out the other side. Yep, this one was a line. So I'm going to put my E off of that plane so you can clearly see that that line is not on that plane. D is on it. So this line intersects this plane. Also construct ED, because there's already a D there, that is non-coplanar to plane T, that intersects at D. Okay, so that's just an example of what it could look like. The next one says draw plane X. So in some corner you want to pick, just put an X for plane X. It contains a segment RS, so I need a segment. And is intersected by line M at T. T is the midpoint of RS. So this is important. Midpoint means it's halfway. So we need to make sure this line is halfway. It doesn't have to be straight up and down like that. But at point T, this is line M, needs to show line M intersects plane X, contains segment RS and is intersected by line M at T. Okay, and T is the midpoint of RS. So to show a midpoint, you have to put the little marks here to show that that's halfway. Alright, so lots of symbols to draw and knowing that what's a segment, what's a line, what's a midpoint. Again, if it says the word perpendicular, you want to put a box right here in a corner. The last example we're going to do is now we're going to look at a picture. They've given us some information and we want to see if we can interpret. For example, tell is something congruent or parallel or perpendicular. So we're going to go through and try and highlight things that I see. One thing I noticed right here. Okay, that's a box in the corner. That box represents something is meeting at 90 degrees. Which tells me something's perpendicular. So I'm trying to figure out, I could say like WX, we would call that a segment because it doesn't have arrows, is perpendicular to WB. Okay, so now we're going to go through and say, okay, what else do we see? One of the things I noticed in this one that I forgot to mention on the last page is I see these arrows. This arrow here and here mean parallel. So I'm going to flip back over here, and we picked FE. So I'm going to put a little parallel symbol here. So when you see two lines like this, if they have arrows on them like that, that means that the two things are parallel. Okay? So back over here, my two lines that are parallel, I could say line XV is parallel to line UT. Okay? And I noticed one more thing in this picture. And I don't know that I have another highlighter right on me, so You notice those little marks in the corner? That means those angles are congruent. So if I want to name this angle, S has to be in the middle of this angle. So UST is congruent to angle. This one, T, has to be in the middle. So if I said UST, I'll say UTS. Let's look at the next one. We're going to try and figure out the last one we have here. What do we see in the picture? Take a minute, pause the video, try and see what you can come up with. I will tell you this one has 3 things in this picture that we need to recognize. One thing I notice here is we have a 90-degree corner. So I'm going to say line UV, this is perpendicular to, it's going to be line BX. Okay, that's one thing I noticed. This line and this line are considered perpendicular. Okay. I also noticed in here we have these little arrows. So this and this are considered parallel. So I will say line, use 2 letters now, like UW is parallel to BX. Alright? And the last thing that we didn't do on the other one, last one had congruent angles, this one has congruent segments. So that means from here to here, that little mark, and from here to here are congruent. They are equal distance. So I would say segment UW is congruent to segment BX. It's important this one is congruent segments because lines cannot be congruent. So you want to make sure you use the segment symbol on those. That is where most people miss things on this quiz, is writing, is it a line, is it a segment that you're talking about. So just FYI when you're going through those, okay? And that is it for that day's notes.